22 years ago, before the rumors, before the whispers, before the judgment, she was just a happy young mother. The river near their small African village was once a place of life. Women washed clothes there, children laughed along the banks, and the sound of flowing water blended with the rhythm of village life. She used to sit under a wide acacia tree, watching her little boy play near the shallow edge, his laughter brighter than the sun. That day seemed ordinary. The sky was clear, the air was warm, and the river looked calm. She turned away only for a moment, just a moment to rinse a cloth and adjust the bucket beside her. But sometimes, a single moment is enough to change a life forever. When she looked back, her son was no longer where he had been. At first, she thought he was hiding playfully behind a rock. She called his name, smiling. No answer. The smile faded. The water, once gentle, now looked deep and endless. Panic rose in her chest as she ran along the riverbank, screaming his name. Villagers rushed to help, diving into the water again and again. But the river did not return what it had taken. That evening, the same river that once echoed with laughter felt cold and cruel. She held her child's lifeless body, her tears mixing silently with the river water. In that unbearable grief, something inside her broke. From that day on, water was no longer just water, it was a thief. And she made a silent promise to herself. Never again. Started as a whisper between two women at the village well. She never bathes her son, one of them said quietly, glancing over her shoulder. For 22 years, the other replied, eyes wide with disbelief. In a small African village where news travels faster than the wind, the rumor spread like wildfire. By sunset, everyone had heard the story. Some exaggerated it. Others added their own assumptions. Soon, it wasn't just about bathing anymore. It became a symbol of neglect, of strangeness, of something wrong with her. Children began to stare at the young man whenever he walked through the dusty paths. They would cover their noses dramatically and laugh, even if there was no smell at all. Women shook their heads in disapproval whenever his mother passed by. Men muttered that she was not fit to be called a mother. No one asked her why. No one tried to understand. The story grew bigger with each telling. Some claimed she feared water for superstitious reasons. Others said she was cursed. A few even believed she was punishing her son for something unknown. The truth was buried beneath layers of gossip. Yet through all the noise, she remained silent. Every time she stepped outside, she could feel the weight of eyes following her. Every whisper felt like a stone thrown at her back. But she never defended herself. She simply held her son's hand a little tighter and walked forward. Because sometimes, the loudest rumors hide the quietest pain. The humiliation did not come all at once. It came slowly, in glances, in whispers, in laughter that stopped the moment she appeared. Every morning, as the sun rose over the red soil of the village, her son would walk through the narrow, dusty paths to the market. His clothes were always clean but simple, slightly worn from years of use. Still, the other boys would point at him and laugh. "There goes the boy who never bathes," they would mock. Some would dramatically step aside as he passed, pretending to protect themselves. Their laughter echoed loudly, sharper than any insult. He kept his head down, pretending not to hear, pretending not to feel. At the well, the women were no kinder. When she approached with her bucket, conversations would suddenly grow quiet. Then, just as suddenly, the whispers would begin again. "How can a mother be like that? She must be hiding something. Poor boy." The words floated in the air like dust, impossible to escape. At community gatherings, she noticed how space formed around them, invisible but deliberate. No one openly attacked her, yet the silence was heavier than shouting. Even elders, who once greeted her warmly, now avoided her eyes. But the deepest pain was not the mockery. It was watching her son absorb it. She saw how his shoulders stiffened when people laughed. She saw how he avoided meeting anyone's gaze. At night, when he thought she was asleep, she heard him sigh deeply in the darkness. And still, she said nothing. Because defending herself would mean reopening wounds she had fought for years to close. So she carried the shame in silence, a burden only she understood. In a village where every action demanded an explanation, she chose to offer none. When the whispers grew louder, she did not react. When the laughter followed her down the dusty road, she did not turn around. She simply kept walking, her back straight, her steps steady, her hand gently wrapped around her son's. Inside, however, it was different. Each word people spoke about her felt like a quiet cut, not sharp enough to scream from, but deep enough to ache for years. She heard everything: the mockery at the well, the sighs of disappointment from elders, the cruel jokes from children who did not understand pain. But she never defended herself. At night, when the village fell silent and the oil lamp flickered against the mud walls of their small home, she would sit alone for a while. Her son would already be asleep, his breathing soft and calm. She would watch him carefully, as if making sure he was still there. Sometimes her eyes would fill with tears, not of weakness, but of exhaustion. She carried two battles within her, one against the world and one against her own memories. More than once, she opened her mouth to explain the truth to someone. More than once, she almost spoke, but the words always stopped at her throat. Some pain is too sacred to share with those who only want gossip. So she chose endurance. She chose silence over sympathy, because in her heart, protecting her son mattered more than protecting her reputation. And that quiet strength, though unseen, was the bravest thing about her. Rain was never just rain for her. Whenever dark clouds gathered over the village and the first drops began to fall on the red soil, most people felt relief. Children ran outside laughing, lifting their faces toward the sky. Farmers smiled, grateful for the blessing. The scent of wet earth filled the air. But inside her small mud house, she froze. The sound of rain hitting the tin roof did not bring peace. It brought memories. Her hands would instinctively tighten around whatever she was holding. Her breathing would grow shallow. Sometimes, she would quietly close the wooden door, as if trying to shut the rain out completely. Water had a voice to her, and that voice echoed from the past. If someone mentioned the river in casual conversation, she would grow distant. Her eyes would lose focus, staring at something only she could see. The flowing water others described as beautiful, she saw as deep, dark, and endless. Even at home, she avoided using more water than necessary. She cleaned carefully, sparingly. When her son once asked why they never went to the river like other families, she simply said, "It's not safe." She never told him how the sound of rushing water still rang in her ears at night. She never told him how her heart pounded whenever he walked near puddles after rain. To the village, it looked like stubbornness, like ignorance, like strange behavior. But in truth, it was fear, raw and unresolved. Water was not her enemy. The memory attached to it was. And no matter how many years passed, that fear remained, flowing quietly beneath the surface of her strength. Long before the rumors defined her, tragedy did. 22 years ago, she was not the silent, guarded woman the village knew. She was vibrant, always smiling, her laughter blending with the rhythm of daily life. Her first son was the center of her world, a curious little boy who loved the river more than anything. He would splash at the edge, chasing tiny fish, his giggles echoing across the water. The river had always been part of the village's survival. It gave them water, food, and routine. No one feared it. Until that day. The current was stronger than usual, though it did not look dangerous. The surface shimmered peacefully under the sun. She remembered adjusting the basket on her head, calling out to her son to stay close. He waved back at her, smiling. Then he slipped. There was no dramatic storm, no warning scream, just a sudden splash and silence that felt unnatural. At first, she thought he would rise again laughing. Seconds passed. Then panic took over. She ran into the water without thinking, her heart pounding violently. Villagers rushed to help, diving repeatedly, searching desperately. But the river had already pulled him beyond reach. When they finally found him, the world felt still. She held him in her arms, rocking back and forth, whispering his name as if he could still hear her. Something inside her shattered that evening. The river that once symbolized life now symbolized loss. And in her grief, she built a wall around her heart, a wall made of fear, guilt, and a promise never to trust water again. From that day forward, she was never the same. The night after the funeral, the village was quiet. No laughter echoed from the riverbanks. No children ran through the dusty paths. Even the wind felt softer, as if it understood that something sacred had been lost. She sat alone inside her small mud house, her back against the cold wall, her arms wrapped around herself. The oil lamp flickered weakly, casting trembling shadows across her face. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but no tears came now. Grief had moved deeper, beyond tears, beyond sound. In her lap rested the tiny shirt her son had worn that day. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind. If only she had held his hand tighter. If only she had not turned away. If only she had trusted her fear. Guilt wrapped around her heart like chains. That night, she made a silent promise. Not to the village, not to the river, but to herself. Never again. If she were ever blessed with another child, she would protect them from water, from rivers, from anything that could pull them away in a single heartbeat. She would rather endure shame, misunderstanding, and isolation than feel that emptiness again. Years later, when her second son was born, she held him close and whispered the same promise into his tiny ear. The villagers saw control. They saw overprotection. They saw strange behavior. But they did not see the vow born from unbearable loss. To them, it looked unreasonable. To her, it was survival. Because sometimes, a promise made in pain becomes the rule you live by, even if the world never understands why. People believed she was careless. They thought refusing to bathe her son meant she did not value cleanliness. Or worse, that she did not care. But what they never saw was the quiet love that filled the small space inside their home. Every morning before sunrise, she woke up first. She prepared simple meals with careful hands, making sure her son never left hungry. His clothes, though old, were always washed carefully in small amounts of water at home, never near the river. She ironed them gently with heated metal, smoothing every wrinkle as if protecting him from the world's judgment. At night, when the village slept, she would sit beside him and apply oil to his hair, massaging his scalp slowly. It was her silent ritual, her way of nurturing him without bringing him close to her greatest fear. Sometimes she would trace his face softly, memorizing every feature, as if afraid that even time could steal him away. When he fell sick, she stayed awake the entire night, placing a cool cloth on his forehead, whispering prayers under her breath. She knew every expression on his face, when he was tired, when he was hiding sadness, when he pretended not to hear the insults from outside. Her love was not loud. It did not need witnesses. It was in the way she walked on the outer side of the road, so he stayed safer. In the way she held his hand tighter when clouds gathered. In the way she endured humiliation without letting it touch him directly. The village saw fear. But inside that fear was fierce, protective love. She may have been broken by the past, but she never stopped being a mother. And that love, though misunderstood, was deeper than any river. For years, the truth lived only inside her. But secrets have a way of rising to the surface, just like something long buried beneath water. Her son was no longer a child. He had grown into a tall, thoughtful young man. The laughter of others still followed him sometimes, but he had learned to endure it quietly, just like his mother. Yet one question had always remained in his heart. One evening, after a heavy rainfall, he found her sitting near the doorway, staring at the puddles forming in the yard. Her face looked distant, fragile in a way he had never seen before. "Mother," he asked gently, "why are you so afraid of water?" For a moment, she said nothing. The air felt heavy. The sound of dripping rain echoed between them. Then, for the first time in 22 years, she spoke. Her voice trembled as she told him about his older brother, about the river, the sudden slip, the desperate screams, and the unbearable silence that followed. She confessed the guilt she had carried, the promise she had made, and the fear that had shaped every decision since his birth. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, not just of sorrow, but of release. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, the room felt different, lighter, yet filled with emotion. The truth that had once separated them now connected them. Outside, a few villagers had gathered, having overheard parts of the story. Slowly, the whispers began to fade. For the first time, people saw not a strange woman, but a grieving mother. And in that moment, the rumor lost its power. Because truth, when finally spoken, is stronger than years of judgment. The next morning felt different. The rain had washed the dust from the village paths, leaving the red earth darker and calmer. The air was fresh, almost symbolic, as if something heavy had finally been lifted. Her son stood beside her outside their small home. For the first time, there was no distance between them created by silence. The truth had filled that space. He gently took her hand, not as a child seeking protection, but as a grown man offering it. "Mother," he said softly, "you saved me every day, not from water, but from losing you to fear." His words broke something inside her, not in pain, but in healing. The promise she had carried like armor for 22 years suddenly felt lighter. She realized that in trying to protect him from the river, she had also protected him from neglect, from danger, from a world that could be just as cruel. Later that day, something unexpected happened. Instead of whispers, there were greetings. Instead of stares, there were lowered eyes filled with quiet regret. The villagers, now knowing the truth, saw her strength differently. Some offered apologies. Others simply offered respect. She did not need grand gestures. All she needed was understanding. As the sun began to set, her son walked with her toward the edge of the village. They stopped at a safe distance from the river. The water flowed calmly, no longer a monster, just water. She looked at it for a long moment. This time, she did not turn away, because healing does not erase the past, but it allows you to face it without breaking. And finally, after 22 years, she felt free.